Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Dela Rinanda Putri. I am a student of International Program for Law and Sharia Faculty of Law in Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. To fulfill competency test 3 of labor law, I will explain a little about the infringements of foreign workers on job creation law, where the job creation law uses the concept of the omnibus law. Increasing economic growth is one of the ways to improve the welfare of the Indonesian people, which is part of our country's specific goals of efforts to increase economic growth throughout manpower sector, one of which regulates foreign workers and those who work in Indonesian companies. That in order to increase economic growth to achieve an increasingly prosperous society, the government has taken steps to revive various statutory provisions by using the concept of the omnibus law, one of which in the fields of manpower or employments regulate foreign workers. Omnibus law is a method or concept of making rules that combines several rules with different statutory regulations into a large law that functions as an umbrella act. And then when the regulation promulgated, the consequence is to revoke several rules resulting from the merger, and their substancy is subsequently declared invalid either in part or in whole. Indonesia have a law that uses omnibus law concept, namely job creation law. The job creation law, or the law number 11 of 2020, is the law in Indonesia which was ratified on 2020 October 5 by the Republic of Indonesian People Representative Council and promulgated on 2020 November 2 with the aim of creating jobs and increasing foreign investment and domestically by reducing regulatory requirements for business permits and land acquisition. The government claims that the job creation law exists for the sake of ease of investment in Indonesia, especially foreign investment. The entry of investment will control economic growth while creating more jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the newest regulations that can encourage an increase in foreign investment is the article that regulates entry permits for foreign workers. The job creation law regulates 11 clusters, including simplification of business licensing, investment requirements, employment, ease of empowering micro, small, and medium enterprises, cost of doing business, support for innovation research, government administration, imposition of taxation, land acquisition, investment in government project, and finally the economic zone. So this law is called the omnibus law because this law can immediately amend several laws at once. According to Audrey, the omnibus law is a bill which includes more than one aspect that is combined into one law. Lawrence and Friesman argues that the effectiveness and success of law enforcement depends on three elements on the legal system, namely the structure of the law, the substance of the law, and the legal culture. The legal structure is concerned with law enforcers or the apparatus in it, the substance of the law concerning the law in it, and the legal culture concerning the community. The legal structure in this case is law enforcement officers in the fields of manpower, which in fact are law enforcement officers in the labor sector. Especially for foreign workers, there is a disagreement whether it is carried out by civil servant investigator at the Ministry of Manpower or civil servant investigator at the Directorate General of Immigration. Civil servant investigator research capacity in terms of law enforcement, resulting in not maximal law enforcement for foreign workers. The substance of the law, which is the content of the law itself, means that the content of the law must be something that aims to create justice and can be applied in society. In this case, it is the statutory provision concerning foreign workers. In fact, in this discussion, it is regulated in the job creation law. In fact, the law enforcement that is carried out by enforcement officers against foreign workers who violate the law is only an administrative penalty in the form of fines and deportation. This raises confusion regarding the application of statutory provisions which are appropriate and correct, not only in terms of legal substance, namely which legal provision will be applied, but also to the apparatus, namely the matter of legal structure. This result in not maximal law enforcement related to statutory provision that involve cross-sectoral, namely the Minister of Manpower and Director General of Immigration. The law enforcement in the fields of manpower, especially for foreign workers, it is inseparable from the external legal culture, namely the community. which affect people who live in the company environment, especially especially in the central Kalimantan area, do not really care about the status of foreign workers and their environment, whether legal or illegal, because what the community knows they are employed by the company, so that this has been generally accepted as something normal, so that this affects the internal legal culture, namely the culture that is in law enforcement officials when they see that foreign workers do not cause a reaction and the general public, or there are no reports from the public. The legal apparatus will consider the presence of foreign workers is not a problem. The situation has created a negative and responsive legal culture that has resulted in not maximizing law enforcement against foreign workers and foreign labor companies. According to Friedman, subjects that make up the legal culture are divided into two. There is an external legal culture that engages the wider community in general. In addition, there is an internal legal culture, which is a culture developed by law enforcement officials. These two types of legal culture influence each other. If the external legal culture is healthy, then the internal legal culture will automatically adjust, because law enforcement officials are essentially a product of their own society. If people are not accustomed to pay bribes, law enforcement officials will also not be accustomed to asking for bribes. On the other hand, if law enforcement officials are accustomed to warmly rejecting every form of bribery, then the public will also not dare to initiate bribes. When examined from the job creation law using the concept of the omnibus law from the aspect of legal substances, namely the law and regulation governing foreign workers, the omnibus law requires that they be regulated in one statutory regulation. This is of course to avoid overlapping legislation as regulating workers, foreign workers, and foreign labor companies before import. Whereas from the aspect of the legal structure, namely the law enforcement official in the concept of the omnibus law, if all aspects including law enforcement officials are regulated under one legal umbrella, then there is only one law enforcement officials in the legal umbrella. This is different in fact from law enforcement officials and law enforcement for foreign workers. Namely, there are law enforcement officials who are civil servant investigator at the Ministry of Manpower, and there are civil servant investigator at the Directorate General of Immigration who handle illegal foreign workers and foreign workers. Furthermore, the aspect of legal culture is that the community in the environment where the foreign worker is located is not concerned whether it is legal or illegal, so that the apparatus will also not care about this, which forms a negative and responsive legal culture which results in law enforcement against foreign workers and foreign labor companies. Not maximally, this is contrary to the concept of the omnibus law, which is regulated more comprehensively in the form of a single law, so that both community law enforcement officials involved in one aspect will be more quickly anticipated, so that negative cultures can be prevented and will not develop, so that law enforcement will be increasingly maximum. Thus, the omnibus law is appropriate to apply in law enforcement against foreign workers and also for companies, which in turn will increase economic growth, so that the Indonesian nation will be more prosperous. So it can be concluded that omnibus law in law enforcement for foreign workers can actually answer and overcome the lack of maximum law enforcement for foreign workers from the aspect of legal substance, aspect of legal structure, and from aspect of legal culture. The job creation law that used the concept of the omnibus law, which was ratified on 2020 October 5 by the Indonesian Parliament and promulgated on 2020 November 2, is the right answer to increase economic growth in the context of the welfare of the Indonesian nation. That's all for me. Thank you.